The wind never stopped on Eagle Peak. It carried the scent of pine and stone, the sharp bite of altitude, and the hush of places forgotten by most of the world. Lena Walker stood with a boot sinking into the frost-crusted earth, her eyes fixed on the weather-beaten silhouette of the old fire lookout tower. It perched on the edge of the ridge like a relic of a different century, its wood gray with age, windows shattered, and the metal staircase half-eaten by rust. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Yet, in the dying amber light of late afternoon, something about it shimmered with promise. She'd spent her last $10 buying it. The deal had been almost laughable. The county called it a derelict historical structure, sold in an auction nobody attended except her. The others thought it was a waste, a forgotten outpost that hadn't been manned since the 1970s, unreachable by vehicle for most of the year. But Lena had driven 6 states and hiked 2 miles straight up to get here. "This is it," she murmured, pushing her wind-blown hair from her face. She was 31, born and raised in small-town Wyoming, the daughter of a forest ranger and a school teacher. Her father had died when she was 15, caught in a wildfire on a ridge not far from here. Her mother followed years later, worn out by grief and cancer. Lena had grown up with maps of mountains on her bedroom walls and stories of towers just like this one. Maybe that was why she'd come. Maybe it wasn't about the tower at all, but about finishing something that had started long before she was born. The wind howled through the open frame as she climbed the metal steps, her backpack heavy with supplies. She tested each step carefully, the metal creaking under her boots. The old lookout's observation room was stripped bare except for an old metal chair, a few broken panes of glass, and a dusty firefinder stand, the rotating map device used by rangers to locate smoke on the horizon. Lena exhaled, the sound small against the vast silence. "This is where you lived, huh, Dad?" she whispered. From here, the world fell away into blue haze and distant peaks. The valley below was endless. No roads, no houses, just wilderness. The sunset painted the horizon in blood-orange streaks, and for a moment, Lena felt an old ache ease. She knelt beside the rusted firefinder and brushed her fingers across the engraved plate. U.S. Forest Service, 1939. The metal was cold. Beneath it, she noticed a faint outline, like a seam in the wooden floor. Curious, she pried at it with her knife. The old wood gave way with a sigh, revealing a narrow compartment beneath. Inside lay a small, weathered journal bound in cracked leather. Lena froze. The cover bore a single word, written in a faded hand. June. She flipped it open. The pages were delicate, yellowed, but the handwriting was neat and precise. Entries dated from 1942. June 3rd. The smoke to the west is growing, but we've been told to hold our post. Supplies are low. Robert hasn't returned. The radio died this morning. June 5th. Found another map, hidden under the floorboards last night. It's not official. Someone marked the mines again. June 8th. If anyone finds this, follow the ridge east. The stones mark the trail. Lena's pulse quickened. Mines? Stones? She turned more pages. The entries ended abruptly on June 10th, 1942. The ink bled down the paper as if written in a storm. "They're coming! I can hear the engines! They know what we found!" The rest of the page was torn away. Lena sat back, the journal trembling in her hands. The cold seemed to creep up her spine. Who was June? What engines? Outside, the wind picked up, slamming one of the broken window frames against the wall. A sheet of loose paper fluttered from underneath the desk. She grabbed it before it flew away, a map drawn in the same hand. The ridges were sketched roughly, but she recognized the peak she stood on. A trail was marked with a dotted line leading east toward a spot marked X, and below the X, hidden, 1942, keep safe. Lena exhaled, her breath fogging. "You've got to be kidding me!" It couldn't be real, but the handwriting matched the journal and the dates fit the era. The old mines around these mountains had closed during the war. Some said it was for safety. Others whispered it was because of hidden gold veins the government seized for funding the war effort. Still, she'd never seen an actual lead, until now. She glanced out the window. The sun had slipped below the horizon. Shadows thickened across the ridgeline. Her phone had no signal, and the last bit of warmth was draining fast. She could camp inside the tower tonight, she decided, and follow the map at dawn. As the sky darkened, she lit a small lantern from her pack and made a nest of blankets in one corner. The glow cast soft golden light on the cracked wood and peeling paint. For a moment, she almost felt safe. But then she heard it. A sound beneath the tower. Metal, slow, deliberate. Lena froze, listening. Something or someone was moving below the floorboards. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The wind whistled through the cracks, but this sound was different. It was steady, scraping, like a chain being dragged. She grabbed her flashlight and shone it through the gap in the floorboards. The beam caught only dust and shadows. "Probably just an animal," she whispered, but even as she said it, the sound stopped. Too suddenly. Lena's breath came in shallow pulls. She turned off the light and sat still for a long time, trying to steady her heartbeat. Outside, the trees whispered secrets to each other in the dark. Somewhere far off, an owl called. Finally, exhaustion won. She drifted into uneasy sleep, clutching the journal to her chest. At dawn, the world was painted in silver mist. Lena woke stiff and cold, the air sharp enough to sting her lungs. She brewed coffee on her tiny camp stove and spread the map on the floor. The trail east, the X. She packed her gear and stepped outside. The sun broke over the ridges, bathing the tower in light so bright it looked new again. Halfway down the slope, she found what June had written about. 3 stone piles marking the start of a faint path. She smiled grimly. "Okay, June, let's see what you were hiding." The trail wound through thick fir trees and across a rocky spine. Twice she lost it, only to find another stone marker or a carved tree that pointed the way. The hike was steep, punishing, and silent. No birds, no signs of life except the distant rustle of wind through the peaks. By noon, she reached a narrow ravine split by an old landslide. The map showed the X just beyond it. She climbed down, sliding on loose shale. Her hands brushed rock. And then caught something unnatural. Metal. A steel door embedded in the mountainside, rusted, half covered by decades of dirt and age. Her breath caught. It looked military. She knelt and brushed away more soil. A faint emblem appeared. U.S. Forest Division, restricted access. Restricted? For what? The lock was old but brittle. She used her crowbar to pry it loose. The hinges screamed as the door opened. A rush of stale, cold air spilled out, carrying the faint scent of oil and age. Lena switched on her headlamp and stepped inside. The passage sloped downward, cut into solid stone. Rusted pipes lined the ceiling. After a few steps, she found herself in a narrow chamber, maybe 15 feet across, filled with dusty crates and wooden boxes stamped with faded serial numbers. She knelt beside one and brushed off the grime. The label read, "Property of U.S. Geological Survey, 1942. Her fingers trembled as she pried open it. Inside was straw, and beneath it, dull metal bars stacked neatly. Gold, real gold. She felt.
He hesitated, then stepped forward, revealing himself in the dim light. He looked mid-40s, his features weathered, his clothes practical but not military. Dark jacket, hiking boots, a small insignia on his shoulder she didn't recognize. His gray-green eyes watched her steadily. "My name's Mason," he said simply, "and I'm here because of you." Lena's throat went dry. "Because of me?" "You bought the lookout tower," he said, gesturing toward the journal clutched in her jacket pocket. "You found June's record. We've been monitoring anyone who showed interest in that property." Lena frowned, heart hammering harder. "Monitoring? For what, this gold?" Mason's gaze flicked toward the open crate. "So you did find it?" "Hard not to," she snapped. "What the hell is this? Some kind of trap? You government?" "Not exactly," he said. "Let's just say my unit has ties to what was left of the U.S. Geological Division's wartime project. That gold shouldn't exist anymore. It was supposed to be recovered in 1945, but the transport team never made it back." Lena's voice dropped. "So it's stolen." He met her eyes. "Hidden. By order." The tunnel seemed to press in around them. "I think you should start explaining," she said tightly. Mason sighed, ran a gloved hand over his face, and nodded toward the dusty workbench in the corner. "You might want to sit down. This goes back a long way." Reluctantly, she followed, her lantern casting their shadows long against the rock wall. He spoke quietly. In the early 1940s, this region, Eagle Ridge, was used as a storage site for materials bound for the Pacific War Front. Gold, yes, but also something more classified. Experimental alloys. The lookout towers were used to watch for sabotage, not fires. Lena frowned. "That doesn't make sense. My father was a ranger. He said this area was just forest land." His gaze hardened. "Your father worked for the Forest Service, yes, but you never wondered why his old station logs disappeared from the county archives, why his name doesn't appear on the official list of staff after 1973. Her breath caught. "You knew my father?" "Not personally," Mason said, "but he found something up here years before you did. Same as June in 1942. The difference is, he wasn't supposed to survive." The words hit her like a punch. "What are you saying?" "That wildfire that killed him," Mason's tone softened. "It wasn't natural. Someone wanted the ridge cleared. Your father was caught in it before he could warn anyone." The cave felt suddenly airless. Lena's stomach nodded. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not possible. The report said—" "The reports were edited," Mason cut in gently. "I'm sorry, but your father wasn't just a ranger, Lena. He was trying to expose what this mountain was really used for." She stared at the crates of gold, their dull gleam catching her light. "So this is the reason?" Mason hesitated. "Partly. The gold was a cover. What they were really hiding was behind those walls." He pointed deeper into the tunnel. Lena followed his gesture and saw what she'd missed before. Another steel door, half concealed by rock and dust. Smaller than the first, marked with a red symbol faded by time. "What's in there?" "That," Mason said quietly, "is what you don't want to wake." Lena snorted despite the tension. "You sound like a ghost story." He smiled faintly. "If only it were that simple." Before she could respond, a faint vibration trembled through the floor. Distant, rhythmic, like machinery buried deep below. Mason's head snapped toward the sound. Damn it, they're early. Who's early? He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her wrist. We have to go, now. She jerked away. I'm not leaving. I found this. You can't just... Listen to me, he hissed. This site is being reclaimed. There are people, contractors, mercenaries who've been trying to dig this out for years. The only reason they haven't is because we kept it buried. But once you open that door... Realization hit her like ice. They tracked me. He nodded grimly. They'll be here within an hour, and they won't care about keeping you alive. Her mind raced. Gold, hidden tunnels, her father's death, it was all tangled into something far bigger than she'd imagined. She glanced back toward the crates. We can't just leave this here. We're not, Mason said. He pulled something from his coat, a small metallic disc with blinking blue lights. He set it on the ground near the entrance. Lena's eyes widened. Is that? Not a bomb, he said. A tracker. It'll send false coordinates to anyone looking for us. Then, with a rough motion, he kicked the steel doors shut behind them, sealing the tunnel. They climbed back toward daylight. By the time they reached the surface, Lena's lungs burned, and the horizon had turned gray with incoming clouds. Mason paused near the edge of the ridge, scanning the distant tree line with binoculars. They're here, he muttered. Lena followed his gaze. 2 black SUVs were winding slowly up the Forest Service road. Vehicles that didn't belong to any ranger unit she knew. What do they want? She whispered. What everyone wants. Control of what's buried under this mountain. He handed her a folded map, older than the one she'd found in June's journal. Take this. It's your father's. He made it before he died. It shows another way off the ridge, through the North Pass. You'll need it. She took it, her fingers trembling. You're coming with me. Mason hesitated, then shook his head. If they see us both, they'll shoot to kill. I'll draw them away. You head north, keep moving until you hit the river valley. There's a safe house marked on the map. Tell them Mason sent you. She stared at him, the weight of everything crashing over her. You expect me to just run? To leave all of this? He met her eyes. If you die here, your father's story dies too. You need to finish what he started. A gust of cold wind tore through the clearing, scattering pine needles. Below, the engines of the SUVs echoed faintly through the trees. Mason turned and started down the slope in the opposite direction, moving with practiced silence. Go, he shouted without looking back. Lena hesitated one last heartbeat, then ran. The trail north was rough and steep. The clouds broke open, spitting sleet and rain as she climbed higher into the ridgeline. Behind her, the crack of distant gunfire echoed faintly through the trees. She didn't stop. Hours later, drenched and shivering, she reached the crest of the North Pass. The lookout tower was now a distant speck through the fog. She collapsed against a boulder, breath ragged, and pulled the journal and the new map from her pack. Her father's handwriting stared back at her. If you find this, Lena, trust no one from the division. The truth is deeper than gold. The words blurred through her tears. From far below, a distant explosion rolled across the valley. The sound was deep, final. The tunnel. Mason. She didn't know if he had survived, but she knew one thing now. Someone was willing to kill to keep that mountain's secret buried. As the storm broke fully overhead, Lena swore to herself she'd uncover every piece of it, no matter how many ghosts she had to wake. She folded the maps, tucked the journal into her coat, and started down the mountain toward the unknown. The storm clung to the ridge all night, a white roar that swallowed every sound except Lena's breath. By dawn, the clouds tore open, and the sun burned through like a wounded eye. Her clothes were soaked, her hands scraped and numb, but she was alive. She stumbled down the north slope toward the valley. The map Mason had given her, her father's map, was smudged with rain, but she could still make out the faded red line leading toward the river. Beneath it, in her father's tight script, was a note. Cabin near the bend. Key under the step. Trust only the old ranger's code.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us.
Now back to the story. The path cut through dense pines. Every snap of a twig made her flinch. She couldn't tell if she was being followed. The forest had that hollow, echoing quiet that made everything feel like a whisper of movement. By midday, she saw the river glinting ahead, broad, cold, and fast, tumbling between mossy boulders. A small cabin sat half-hidden behind cedar trees, smoke stains darkening the stone chimney. It looked abandoned, but the door was locked. Lena crouched, feeling under the steps until her fingers brushed cold metal. The key. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. The air smelled of old wood, coffee, and something faintly metallic. Dust coated everything except the table in the center of the room. On it lay a shortwave radio, a half-burned candle, and a faded photograph, her father standing beside the same lookout tower she had bought, his arm around a woman in ranger's uniform. Lena's chest tightened. She picked up the photo. The woman's name was written on the back in faint pencil. June Carter, 1942. Lena's heart skipped. June, the same name as the journal. But this couldn't be. June from the journal would have been long dead by the time her father worked that post. Unless June hadn't died in 1942. Lena turned on the radio. Static filled the cabin. She twisted the dial slowly. To copy that, North Ridge is compromised. She froze, the voice faint but real. A man's voice, low and urgent. No sign of Walker or Mason. Proceed to sweep Sector 6. Her blood ran cold. They were still searching. She turned the volume down and sat back, pulse racing. They didn't know where she was, yet. Then she noticed something odd, a series of letters carved into the wooden table edge, half hidden by dust. RC, 42 degrees 16 north, 111 degrees 19 west. Coordinates. She grabbed her map and traced the location. It pointed to a ridge just north of the river, a place marked with an old mining symbol. A new lead. Lena packed her gear again, only hesitating to pocket the photograph. But when she turned to leave, she heard the faintest creak of a floorboard outside. She went still. Someone was there. Her instincts screamed. She ducked behind the table, grabbing the old hunting rifle that hung over the fireplace. The door handle turned slowly. Then came a quiet knock. "Miss Walker?" Her heart nearly stopped. Mason. She ran to the door, threw it open, and almost collapsed in relief. He stood there, soaked, bruised, his jacket torn, and his face streaked with dirt. "You're alive," she breathed. "Barely," he muttered, stepping inside. He glanced around the cabin quickly, his eyes landing on the radio. "You used it. Just to listen. They're sweeping the ridge." He nodded grimly. "Then we don't have long." She handed him the photograph. "Look at this." He took it, his expression tightening as he recognized the woman. "June Carter," he said, "the first lookout assigned to Eagle Ridge." "She knew my father." Mason looked at her sharply. "What makes you think that?" "The photo and this cabin, it was my father's safe house. He must have come here after he found something up there. Maybe June was helping him." Mason set the photo down slowly. "If that's true, it changes everything." "How?" He motioned to the coordinates carved into the table edge. That ridge wasn't part of the original gold transport zone. It was part of the secondary survey area. Geological, not military. Meaning, he said grimly, what they hid up there might not have been gold at all. Lena frowned. "But we saw. Bars stamped with mint seals, yes. But did you notice the alloy marks? They weren't all gold. Some were different, lighter, duller.
If I'm right, your father and June stumbled onto something the government was testing. A mineral compound, one that could store massive energy. Her stomach twisted. You mean a weapon? He nodded once. A prototype material used in the Manhattan experiments. But it was unstable, too dangerous to reproduce. They buried the records and sealed the tunnels. If someone recovers that material now, they'd be rich, she finished bitterly. Or worse, he said. They'd have leverage that could cripple entire markets. Lena stared at the map, the red coordinates burning in her mind. Then we have to find it before they do. Mason exhaled, rubbing his temples. You don't understand. If it's still active, if it's been sitting there for 80 years, it could be radioactive. I grew up on that mountain, she said fiercely. My father died for it. I'm not walking away now. He looked at her a long moment, then nodded. All right, but we do this carefully. He opened his pack and spread out a set of small equipment. Geiger counter, flashlights, rope. We'll go at first light. I'll check the perimeter tonight. Lena nodded, though her body begged for rest. As Mason stepped outside to scan the woods, she sat at the table, tracing the photo's edges. Her father's smile looked younger here, freer. The woman beside him, June, seemed to look directly at the camera with an expression both proud and haunted. June Carter. The name pulsed in her mind as she drifted into uneasy sleep. The next morning, mist hung low over the valley. They set out at dawn, following the coordinates through the thick undergrowth. The climb was rough, and Lena's legs burned, but she pressed on. Mason moved ahead silently, checking the Geiger counter every few minutes. After 3 hours, they reached the ridge marked on the map, a rocky shelf overlooking a deep gorge. This is it, Mason said quietly. Lena scanned the area. At first, it looked like any other patch of wilderness, but then she saw it. A slab of concrete half buried under moss, cracked and tilted. They cleared the debris away. A faint symbol emerged. An eagle inside a triangle. Lena's pulse quickened. Same emblem as the first door. Mason nodded, crouching to examine the edges. This was sealed with reinforced steel. Whatever's under here hasn't been touched since the war. They worked for hours, prying loose rocks and cutting through vines until Mason finally found a small ventilation grate. He shined his flashlight inside and froze. Lena, come look. She knelt beside him. Through the narrow opening, she saw a metallic cylinder the size of a truck engine covered in frost, humming faintly even after all these years. What is that? She whispered. An energy core, an experimental storage system. They must have buried it when the project went rogue. How could it still be running? Because what's inside it isn't from here. Before she could ask what he meant, a sharp crack split the air. Gunfire. They both dove for cover as bullets struck the rock behind them. Mason grabbed her arm. They found us. How? The radio, he hissed. They must have tracked the transmission signal. More shots rang out, closer now. Voices shouted in the trees. Mason pulled a smoke canister from his belt, yanked the pin, and tossed it down the slope. A cloud of white vapor billowed up, masking their position. Go, he barked. They scrambled towards the tree line, sliding over rocks and roots. The air filled with gunfire and echoing shouts. By the time they reached the riverbank again, Lena's lungs burned. Mason's sleeve was torn, blood seeping from a graze on his arm. He ripped the map from his pocket and shoved it into hers. There's a second site, he gasped. Farther south, marked Vault 9. That's where the original logs will be. Find them. It's proof of what they did. What about you? He gave a grim smile. I'll hold them off. I'm better bait than you are. Before she could argue, he turned back towards the ridge, rifle in hand, vanishing into the smoke. Lena stood frozen for one heartbeat, torn between fear and fury, then forced herself to move. She crossed the river, boots sinking into the cold current, clutching the map and the journal to her chest. Behind her, a new explosion rolled through the valley, brighter than lightning, shaking the ground. The ridge was gone, swallowed by fire and smoke. Lena fell to her knees on the far bank, the shockwave echoing through the trees. And then, through the ringing silence, she heard a single sound from her pack. A faint, rhythmic pulse coming from June's old journal. It was glowing.
The pulse from the journal was faint at first, like a heartbeat buried in paper and ink. Lena froze, still kneeling beside the riverbank, the wind tearing at her soaked hair. She held the worn leather cover in her trembling hands. The same book she'd found beneath the floorboards of the lookout tower was now alive. A soft light throbbed beneath its surface, bleeding through the cracks of the cover in blue-white flickers. She pressed a hand to it, half afraid, half mesmerized. The pulse quickened. Then, with a faint click, the leather binding shifted and the journal fell open on its own. Lena gasped. The pages were no longer just paper. They shimmered faintly, covered in lines of text written in her father's handwriting. But that wasn't possible. Her father's notes had been lost years ago, and the pages she'd seen before were June's, written in the 1940s. Yet the ink on these new lines was fresh. Lena, if you're reading this, then you found what I couldn't. Her breath caught. The energy core on Eagle Ridge is not gold, and it's not from this Earth. June and I discovered it in 1973, long after the project was abandoned. She believed it was some kind of atmospheric collector, something that stores ambient power from the planet itself. But I saw more. I saw how it reacted to human contact. It remembers us. Lena stared at the words, her heartbeat thudding in time with the pulsing glow. They killed June for what she tried to protect. They'll come for you too if you stay. But if you can reach Vault 9, you'll find the proof we hid before the fire. The coordinates are burned into the back cover of this book. And Lena, trust Mason if he's still alive. He was one of us once. The light faded, leaving only silence. She turned the journal over and saw what he meant. On the back cover, etched into the leather, were faint numbers. 43 degrees 11 minutes north, 112 degrees 5 minutes west. Vault 9. The same place Mason had told her to find. Her throat tightened. You knew. You knew everything. For a long time she sat by the river, the crash of water drowning out her thoughts. Mason's fate was unknown, the ridge behind her destroyed. And yet, this journal, this thing, had led her one step further. She couldn't turn back now. She packed what she could and started south. By dusk, she reached an old service road half swallowed by weeds. It wound along the valley's edge, past rusted warning signs and forgotten machinery. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, only the low hum of distant thunder. She followed the coordinates, checking her compass every few minutes. According to the map, Vault 9 was buried beneath an old survey station that had long since collapsed. When she finally saw it, her stomach twisted. The station was just a scar of concrete and metal beams jutting from the ground. A massive oak had grown through its center, roots splitting the floor in half. But the symbol carved in one remaining wall was unmistakable, the eagle inside the triangle. She climbed over the rubble and found a metal hatch beneath the roots, rusted and sealed tight. She pried it open with her crowbar. A rush of cold, dry air spilled out. The tunnel below was narrow and steep, lit faintly by the beam of her flashlight. Dust motes danced in the light like snow. At the bottom was a small chamber filled with old filing cabinets, shattered glass, and a single metal container bolted to the wall. Lena approached cautiously. The container was marked Vault 9, classified, access level red. Her hand trembled as she brushed away the grime. The padlock was long rusted, so she smashed it with the crowbar. The door creaked open, and inside she found a stack of film reels, a metal box marked Project Helios, and a small case labeled J. Carter. She pulled the case free and opened it. Inside was a reel-to-reel recorder, a journal, and a faded envelope. She opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. June Carter again,
older this time, standing with 3 men in uniforms beside what looked like the same humming cylinder she and Mason had seen under the ridge. Scribbled on the back were the words, "Helios Prototype, 1942. Do not activate without containment." Her blood ran cold. She pressed the recorder's button. The machine whirred, crackled. Then a voice filled the chamber, soft, tired, and unmistakably June's. "If you're hearing this, it means the division failed to bury the truth. Project Helios was designed to harness radiant energy from the Earth's magnetic field. It worked too well. It began drawing life instead of current. Every living thing within a mile began to die." Her stomach turned. They tried to shut it down, but it wouldn't stop. "We realized it wasn't a machine at all. It was alive." Static swallowed the rest of the recording. Lena stared at the cylinder in the photograph, her mind reeling. Alive? How could a machine be alive? Her flashlight flickered once, then again. The hum of the air deepened. She turned sharply. Something glowed at the far end of the chamber, pale blue light seeping from the cracks in the wall. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically. The same color as the journal. Her breath caught. She stepped closer, feeling warmth radiate from the stone. The pulse grew stronger, matching the beat of her own heart. Then for an instant, she saw movement within the glow, like liquid light shifting beneath the surface, forming shapes that almost looked like letters. She blinked. The light snapped out, leaving her in darkness. The flashlight died. "Not now," she hissed, slapping it. Nothing. The air grew heavier, charged, and her skin prickled as static crawled up her arms. Then a voice, soft, faint, almost inside her head, whispered her name. "Lena." She stumbled back, hitting the wall. "Who's there?" The light flared again, briefly illuminating a figure standing in the corner, thin, dressed in an old ranger uniform, face pale and eyes like flickering stars. Her blood froze. It was June Carter, or what was left of her. The figure tilted its head, mouth barely moving. "You found it." Lena couldn't breathe. "You're not real." June's form flickered like static. "The energy remembers. It keeps what it touches. I warned them." The air around her pulsed again. The journal and Lena's pack began to glow in unison. "What are you?" Lena whispered. June smiled sadly. "What's left of me, and of your father. We're echoes now, stored inside what they built." Tears burned in Lena's eyes. "My father's here?" June's image wavered. Part of him. The energy binds memory, thought, life itself. He tried to shut it down. He failed. "Then how do I stop it? Tell me how." June's face twisted with sorrow. "It can't be destroyed, only sealed again. That's why we left the journal to guide the next one." "The next one?" "You." June whispered, the daughter who'd climbed the same mountain. Before Lena could speak again, the tunnel shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. A deep metallic sound echoed above. Engines. Vehicles. They'd found her again. June's light dimmed, flickering like a dying bulb. "They can't have it. Not again." "What do I do?" June raised a trembling hand toward the glowing wall. "Seal it. Use the core inside the vault. You'll know how when the time comes." Her form shattered like smoke in a wind. The light vanished. Lena was alone again, except for the distant rumble of tires and shouted voices outside. She grabbed the Project Helios case and the journal, stuffed them into her pack, and sprinted up the tunnel. The air outside was thick with headlights and voices barking orders. She ducked into the trees just as armed men flooded the ruins. Black-clad, masked, efficient. One of them knelt near the hatch, radio crackling. "Vault's been breached. Find the girl. Secure the Helios box." Lena crawled through the undergrowth, her pulse loud in her ears. She didn't stop until the voices faded into the distance. When she finally reached the river again, the night sky was glowing faintly, northern lights shimmering unnaturally green across the horizon.
The journal pulsed one more time in her hands, like it was breathing, and then, as she watched, new words began to form on the open page. In her father's handwriting, "They're coming for the source, Lena. The mountain hasn't finished us yet." The aurora shimmered across the night sky like liquid fire, painting the peaks in sickly green and violet hues. Lena crouched beside the river, breathing hard, clutching the pulsing journal to her chest. The words on the page still glowed faintly. "They're coming for the source, Lena. The mountain hasn't finished us yet." Her father's voice echoed in her head, as if the mountain itself had learned to whisper through him. The glow faded, leaving her in darkness once more.
Lena stared up at the looming silhouette of Eagle Ridge. Somewhere inside its frozen heart lay the Helios core, the living energy that had consumed June Carter, her father, and now, possibly, her own fate. She knew what she had to do. She had to seal it before the men in black reached it. But how? She flipped open the journal again, thumbing through the pages. Between her father's notes and June's scattered writing, she pieced together fragments of an old design. Schematics drawn by hand, labeled Containment Chamber Mark III. A round device, cables, something about magnetic compression and biomimetic energy. And then, a chilling note scribbled in her father's slanted hand. Requires human stabilizer for activation. Lena's breath caught. Human stabilizer? Did that mean someone had to interface with it? To contain the living energy in themselves? The idea twisted her stomach. But she didn't have time to question it. The low drone of engines echoed again across the valley, distant but closing fast. They were coming. She slung her pack over her shoulder, gripping the crowbar tight, and began the climb. The trail up Eagle Ridge was nearly invisible now, half buried under rock and snow. The storm from earlier had returned with vengeance, hammering her face with freezing rain. Each step felt heavier than the last. As she climbed, flashes of memory came unbidden. Her father's voice on the radio years ago, his expedition vanishing without a trace, the unanswered questions, the way her mother refused to talk about it afterward. And now, here she was, retracing his final steps toward the same cursed summit. When she reached the old lookout tower again, the place was unrecognizable. The explosion from earlier had gutted the west side. Part of the wall hung open like a broken jaw. Snow drifted in, covering the floorboards. But through the ruin, a strange blue light pulsed from below. The energy core was still alive. Lena descended carefully through the torn floor into the sub-level. The tunnel was warped from the blast, twisted metal, scattered tools, and the faint hum of electricity. At the far end, a circular vault door stood slightly ajar, light bleeding through its seams. She stepped closer. The air grew warmer, charged, humming with static. When she pushed the vault door open, she gasped. Inside was a cavern. The ceiling arched high above, carved from the mountain's heart, its walls lined with strange metallic veins that glowed softly. And in the center hovered the Helios core, a sphere of liquid light, swirling with blues, golds, and silvers, suspended in mid-air above a metal dais. It was beautiful, terrifying, alive. The energy rippled when it sensed her presence, tendrils of light stretching toward her. The hum deepened, vibrating in her chest. And then she heard it again, the faint whisper of a voice. "Lena." Her heart stopped. This time, it wasn't June. It was her father. She stepped forward, tears already stinging her eyes. "Dad?" The light pulsed faster. The air shimmered, and within the sphere, faint shapes began to form. Faces, movements, echoes. She saw her father's eyes for an instant.
his outline blurred but unmistakable. "Dad, it's me. It's Lena." The voice came soft, distant. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," she choked out. "They're coming for it. They'll take it again." "You can't stop them," the voice warned. "Not without sacrifice." "I'll do whatever it takes." Silence. Then, faintly, "Then you already know what you must do." The words from the journal echoed in her mind. "Requires human stabilizer for activation." She stared at the sphere. "You mean it has to bind to someone?" "Yes," came the faint reply. "It feeds on consciousness, memory, emotion. June tried to contain it, but she wasn't strong enough. I tried too. It took everything." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Then why leave the journal? Why tell me to come here?" "Because it remembers me. It will listen to you. You carry my energy, my memories. It needs an anchor that won't destroy it, or us." "Us?" The light pulsed again, softer now, almost tender. "We're all still here, Lena. June, the others. The mountain remembers." The realization hit her like a wave. The Helios core didn't kill. It absorbed. Every life it touched was stored, remembered, held in its luminous prison. And if it wasn't sealed, it would keep feeding. Outside, a thunderous boom shook the mountain. Lena spun around, hearing the echo of voices through the tunnel. They'd breached the outer level. She turned back to the sphere, breathing hard. "Dad, how do I seal it?" A low hum answered. Then, as if guided by unseen hands, one of the consoles along the wall sparked to life. Symbols and readings glowed faintly across the cracked glass. Numbers rising rapidly, radiation spike indicators, magnetic surge, and at the center was a panel labeled Manual Override Core Stabilizer. She ran to it. The console screen flickered and new words appeared. "Insert key." Her heart dropped. Key? What key? Then she remembered. The case she'd taken from Vault 9. She dug it out of her pack, pulling free the small metal cylinder inside, the same one she'd seen in the photo labeled Helios Prototype. She slotted it into the panel. The machine whined, lights blazing to life around the chamber. A countdown began. Stabilization sequence initiated. 2 minutes remaining. The sphere brightened violently, tendrils of light lashing outward, hitting the walls, melting steel. Lena shielded her face as the air grew blindingly hot. "Dad!" she screamed. "Stay with it," her voice echoed. "You're its only anchor now." She heard her hands fly across the panel, trying to read the interface as warnings flashed in red. Core destabilizing, human anchor required for containment. She felt the heat pressing against her skin, burning, but also something deeper, a pull like gravity tugging at her mind. The sphere was calling her. She stepped closer, her father's voice faint but insistent in her ears. "It needs your memory, your will. Show it who you are." She closed her eyes. Images flooded her. Childhood summers in Montana, her father teaching her to hike, the day he vanished into the mountains, the years of silence that followed. All the pain, all the love. She opened her eyes, tears streaming down her face, and pressed her hand to the sphere. The light flared. For a heartbeat, everything vanished. She wasn't in the cavern anymore. She was standing on a sunlit ridge, her father beside her, the force below stretching endlessly into gold light. He smiled. "You always were stubborn." I laughed through the tears. "Guess I got that from you." He reached out, touching my shoulder. "Let go when it's time. The mountain will hold us." Then the world began to dissolve into light. When Lena opened her eyes again, she was lying on the cavern floor. The sphere was gone. The core chamber was dark and silent. Her body ached, her skin still warm from the light. The console beside her blinked a final message before dying. Stabilization complete. Core sealed. She tried to stand, but dizziness washed over her. In her chest, she could still feel the faint hum, like a second heartbeat. She wasn't alone. Her father's voice whispered faintly inside her mind. It's done. The outside, the storm had ended. The sky was streaked with dawn. She stumbled out of the ruins just as the men in black reached the summit. But instead of attacking, they stopped, staring in confusion at the now dark mountain. The energy readings were gone. The Helios core no longer existed. One of them shouted orders, but Lena was already slipping into the trees, disappearing into the mist. Hours later, she reached the base of the valley. The journal was still warm in her pack, its pages glowing faintly. When she opened it, there were new words written across the first page, in a steady, calm hand. We are safe now, Lena. The source sleeps. But remember this, the mountain never forgets. She smiled weakly, tears glistening in her eyes. For the first time, she felt peace. But far behind her, deep beneath the mountain, something stirred. Just a flicker of blue light in the dark, like a heartbeat waiting to wake again. Lena didn't sleep that night. The valley was calm, almost eerily so, with mist curling across the river and the early dawn light spilling pale across the rocks. Yet despite the quiet, she felt the hum. It wasn't loud, not like the core in the mountain, but subtle.
She touched her chest instinctively. The journal in her pack vibrated faintly, almost like it had a heartbeat of its own. Lena swallowed hard. It's still there, she whispered. She had thought the stabilization sealed the Helios core forever. She had thought her father's voice, June's warnings, and the mountain itself were enough. But now, hours later, the energy had imprinted itself on her, bonded with her in ways she didn't fully understand. And it wasn't benign. By midday, she had reached a small town on the valley's edge. She'd avoided the roads leading up to Eagle Ridge, sticking to the forest trails, which meant she smelled like pine, wet soil, and sweat. Her first stop was a small diner where she hoped to eat and think. The waitress, a woman with salt and pepper hair, noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the wildness in her hair. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the woman said, pouring her coffee. Lena smiled weakly. "Something like that." She pulled out the journal, hoping reading might calm her nerves, but as soon as she opened it, words began to form on the page, freshly inked. "Lena, you carry it now. It remembers you. Listen carefully." The letters shimmered faintly, pulsing with that same blue-white glow. Her hands shook. "Dad, June, what is happening to me?" Then, a sharp pain shot through her head, a jolt of pure electricity. She gasped, slamming the journal closed. The lights in the diner flickered, coffee cups rattled on the counter. A low hum filled the room. The waitress frowned. Are you okay, hun?" Lena nodded quickly, trying to appear normal. "Just a headache." She left the diner immediately. Walking through the quiet streets, the journal clutched against her chest. She felt a pull, an invisible tether guiding her northward, back toward Eagle Ridge. Her stomach twisted. She didn't want to return. The core was sealed, wasn't it? But it wasn't just a place anymore. It was a part of her. Over the next days, the symptoms intensified. At night, she dreamed of the mountain, the core pulsing beneath the stone, echoing through her mind. June's voice, her father's voice, whispers of people long dead, all entangled in the living energy. During the day, she felt the hum under her skin. Sometimes her vision blurred and she saw faint trails of blue light following objects, like the air itself had memory. The worst came on the third night. She awoke to the sound of movement in her room. A figure stood in the corner, indistinct, shimmering like a mirage. "Lena," it whispered, the voice unmistakable. "You must return." Her heart jumped. "Who?" June's ghostly form appeared, eyes flickering with faint light. "The seal is weakening. The mountain remembers the core. It tests its anchor." "Tests me?" Lena asked, trembling. "I thought it was sealed." "It is, but only temporarily. The Helios energy bonds with its stabilizer. Its memory is alive, and you are now its stabilizer. That is why you feel it, why it whispers." Lena sank on the floor. "So, I can't escape it?" "No," June said softly. "Not until the source is properly contained permanently. You were chosen by fate or blood to carry this. Your father and I tried, but the mountain required a living anchor. It has chosen you." The words burned in her mind. She had thought the core was behind her, in the mountain. Now she realized it was within her. The following day, Lena returned to the river valley. She had to think. She couldn't explain what was happening to anyone, not the authorities, not the townsfolk, not even Mason if he were alive. She wasn't sure where he had gone. She opened the journal again. More words formed, detailing procedures her father had used and warnings June had left. It wasn't enough to destroy the core, but there was a chance to strengthen the seal and stabilize it further. She spent the day gathering old supplies, cables, batteries, and equipment from abandoned ranger stations along the ridge, making what she could into a makeshift containment array. The instructions were fragmented, incomplete, and dangerous, but it was the only hope she had. As the sun set, she began the climb back to the peak, the mountain looming like a dark sentinel above her. Halfway up the ridge, she paused to catch her breath. The wind tore at her coat, and the trees groaned under the weight of the storm clouds rolling in. The journal glowed faintly in her pack, pulsing in rhythm with the hum under her skin. She pressed her hand to her chest. "I'm still here," she whispered. A sudden flash of movement caught her eye. A shadow slipped between the trees, a figure, hunched, moving fast. Lena stiffened. "Who's there?" she called. A man stepped into view. His jacket was dark, hood pulled low. His eyes glimmered with recognition. Or was it obsession? "Mason?" she asked cautiously. He raised a hand. "Lena! Thank God." "You're alive," she breathed. "I was tracking you. The core. It's destabilizing from here." "You feel it too?" she asked, horrified. Mason nodded grimly. "It's bonded to you. That's why I didn't want anyone else interfering. We need to finish what your father started." She nodded, steeling herself. "Then let's go." Together they climbed the final stretch to the summit, the wind howling around them. The ruined lookout tower stood in silhouette against the storm-dark sky. Below, the cavern entrance gaped open, faint blue light spilling from cracks in the stone. Lena's heart raced. The core inside her pulsed faster now, almost as if aware of the proximity. She took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Mason glanced at her, worry etched on his face. "Remember, don't let it consume you. You have to channel it, not fight it." Lena nodded, gripping the journal tightly. She could feel the energy thrumming through her veins, almost like electricity, almost like blood. The mountain waited, and Lena, anchor of the Helios core, stepped inside. The air in the cavern was thick with electricity, humming like a living heartbeat. Lena's boots crunched over broken stone as she descended the last few steps to the central chamber. The Helios core pulsed at the center, suspended in midair, tendrils of shimmering light stretching outward, brushing the walls like ghostly fingers. Her chest ached, not from exertion, but from the energy thrumming within her, with her. The hum in the cavern matched the one in her veins, like her heartbeat and the cores were one. The core pulsed faster, reacting to her presence. A ribbon of light snaked toward her, brushing her cheek. She gasped, feeling an almost painful warmth spread through her chest, then settled deep in her stomach. "Dad?" she whispered. A voice echoed in her mind, soft and layered, a chorus of memories trapped in the energy. "Lena, you're here. You understand now." The core wasn't just alive, it was sentient. It remembered every life it had touched, every memory absorbed, every experiment buried beneath the mountain, and it wanted her to see it, to know it. Lena sank hard, gripping the journal. Words glimmered across the open page. "To stabilize, you must give of yourself willingly. You are the anchor. You must channel the memories without letting them consume you." She nodded to Mason. "I can do this." He glanced at her, worry etched on his face. "You have to, or it'll tear itself and you apart." Lena stepped closer to the core, holding her hand out. The energy tendrils wrapped around her fingers, coiling like liquid light. It was warm, but yet sharp, like fire under her skin. She took a deep breath and let her consciousness sink into it. Immediately, the world around her dissolved. She was no longer in the cavern. She was standing on a ridge of light. The mountain below, a glowing expanse of energy. Within the core, she could see everything. June Carter running through the corridors of the abandoned tower, her father scribbling frantic notes in his journal, scientists and soldiers long dead, and even the faces of the men who had hunted the core for decades. It all swirled around her. Memories, thoughts, emotions, alive and raw. Pain.
Minutes passed like hours. Every memory she'd ever held, every bond she'd had with her father, June, and the mountain itself became part of the stabilization sequence. She was no longer merely controlling the core, she was anchoring it. The sphere's glow softened, the tendrils of energy retreated, coiling neatly around the central axis. The chaotic hum resolved into a steady, harmonious pulse. The core was contained. Lena sank to her knees, gasping for air. Mason helped her up. "It's stable," he said, awe in his voice. "I can't believe it. You did it." She looked at the sphere. Its light was calm, serene, almost human in its rhythm. She could feel June and her father within it, safe, finally at rest. "I can feel them," Lena whispered. "They're here." Mason nodded. "You didn't just seal it. You connected with it, anchored it." For the first time in months, Lena allowed herself to smile, exhausted, shivering, battered, but triumphant. "The mountain sleeps." The journal's glowing words appeared. Lena held it close. "Yes," she said softly, "it sleeps." But as she looked up at the cavern ceiling, a faint pulse lingered in the shadows, a reminder that the mountain and the Helios core was still alive, waiting, watching. She would never be the same, but she had survived and she had saved everything her father had died to protect. The next day, Lena emerged from Eagle Ridge as the first light of morning bathed the peaks in gold. The valley below was calm, silent, untouched. The storm had cleared. Mason waited at the edge of the tree line, eyes scanning the horizon. He looked relieved when he saw her emerge. "You did it," he said simply. "I did it," Lena agreed, though her voice was still quiet. "But it's still there, in me, always." Mason nodded. "That's the cost of being its anchor, but at least it's safe now." She looked back at the mountain, feeling a pulse in her chest that mirrored the heartbeat of Helios beneath the stone. The peak had claimed a part of her, but she had survived, and for now the mountain slept. And Lena Walker would carry the memory of Eagle Ridge, Helios, June, and her father forever. Lena woke on a narrow cot in a cabin Mason had found along the valley's edge. Sunlight streamed through the cracked windows, catching the dust in the air. Her body ached in places she hadn't realized could ache. But it wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the weight of the core inside her. The Helios core had been stabilized, but the energy still pulsed within her. She could feel it faintly, like a rhythm in her bones. It didn't hurt anymore, not yet, but it was always present, a whispering heartbeat under her skin. She sat up, gripping the journal. The pages were quiet now, but she knew the core was listening. It remembered. Mason stirred in a chair across the room, sipping coffee. "You're awake. How's it feeling?" "Heavy," she admitted, "like carrying a mountain inside me. And I can see things, memories, flashes from the core, June, Dad, others I don't recognize." He nodded solemnly. "It's normal. The core stores everything it's ever touched. Now you're the anchor. It will communicate in ways you might not understand. Visions, feelings, even voices." She rubbed her temples. "I thought I'd be relieved. I thought finishing it would feel done. But I feel like it's just begun." Mason set his coffee down. "It has. Anchoring the Helios core isn't just about containment. It's about balance. It'll try to pull you into its memories, its experiences, especially the traumatic ones. You have to stay yourself. Hold on to who you are." She nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. Over the next week, Lena tried to settle into some semblance of normal life, though there was nothing normal about it. The core's pulse was always there, faint but insistent, syncing with her own heartbeat. Sometimes, late at night, she could hear voices whispering, echoing events she hadn't witnessed. June Carter's last moments, her father's frantic scribbles, soldiers arguing about containment procedures, even the mountain itself groaning under the weight of its energy. One night, she dreamed vividly. She was back in the cavern, the core hovering before her, tendrils of light wrapping around her body, but this time it was different. The energy moved like water, molding itself around her, drawing her into the memories stored within. She saw faces, scientists, soldiers, villagers, hikers, people who had been near the core over decades, their lives, their joys, their fears, their deaths. She tried to pull back, but the core's memory was insistent. A voice, clear and distinct, spoke in her mind. "You cannot run, Lena. You are part of us now. You anchor what cannot be lost." She woke in a cold sweat, gasping, her body trembling. Mason was there. "Another vision?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "It's too much. I can't. It's like I'm everyone who's ever touched it." Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's why the anchor is dangerous, but also why it works. You're alive, you're aware, and you can separate yourself from it. You must remember who you are, Lena Walker." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll try." The days passed with similar patterns. By day, she moved through the valley, scavenging supplies, mapping the mountain's hidden paths, checking that no one approached. By night, she wrestled with visions, whispers, and the weight of Helios's memories. Then came the new threat. One morning, she spotted footprints in the snow along the ridge above the river. Human footprints, recent, deliberate. They were armed, precise, and one held a scanner pulsing with a faint blue light, the same hue of the Helios core. "They've found a way to sense it," Lena muttered under her breath. Mason crouched beside her. "They're tracking the anchor. That's you, Lena. You can't hide it from them entirely." Fear gnawed at her, but she pushed it down. "Then we have to lead them away. The core can't fall into their hands, not after everything." Mason nodded, agreed. "But the closer they get, the harder it will be. We need a plan." Lena glanced at the mountain. Somewhere inside, the core pulsed steadily, listening, remembering. She could feel it in her bones, guiding her. It wanted her to act. "We draw them to the North Ridge," she said finally. "The old collapse tunnels. They won't be able to navigate them, and it gives us leverage." Mason hesitated. "It's risky, but you're right. Let's do it." That night, Lena and Mason moved stealthily through the valley, shadows among shadows. The men in black were close. She could feel their energy, tense and calculating, the scanner pulsing brighter each time they neared her. The core's presence under her skin was constant now, a low thrum syncing with her every step. She had learned to channel it subtly, calming her mind, keeping the pulse steady. At the entrance to the old collapse tunnels, she paused. "This is it," she whispered. Mason nodded. "Once we're inside, we can manipulate the terrain. They'll follow blindly." She took a deep breath, hand on the journal. The Helios core pulsed once approvingly, almost like a heartbeat of encouragement. "Ready?" Mason asked. "Yes," she said, steeling herself. "Let's end this." They stepped into the tunnels. Inside, the darkness was thick. Her flashlight beam bounced off jagged rock walls. The air was cold, damp, and heavy with the smell of earth and old metal. The tunnels twisted unpredictably, a maze. Lena could feel the core guiding her subtly, nudging her towards a section she remembered from the old maps. And then the pursuers entered. The men in black moved cautiously, scanning the walls. One fired a scanner pulse that lit the tunnel in a pale glow. Lena winced as the energy reacted, thrumming through her chest. "Stay calm," she whispered, focusing on her heartbeat. The pulse within her steadied, calming the reactions around her. The men advanced, but the tunnels became treacherous. Jagged rock fell, narrow crevices opened, and the core subtly guided Lena and Mason through safe paths. By the time the men realized the labyrinth was collapsing around them, Lena and Mason had already reached the northern exit. Lena paused outside, looking at the snowy ridge bathed in moonlight. She could hear the distant shouting behind her, the frustrated scuffle of boots on stone, but she didn't look back. The Helios core pulsed faintly under her skin, synchronized with her heartbeat. She had survived the first threat, but she knew this was only the beginning, because carrying the core came with a cost, and it had only just begun to ask for her obedience. Later, in the safety of a hidden cot deeper in the valley, Lena traced her finger over the glowing journal.
The men in black approached cautiously, scanners raised, weapons ready. Lena stepped forward, the core pulsing beneath her skin. She focused on the energy, letting it flow outward in subtle waves. The snow near their feet shifted slightly, as if the mountain itself were rising to meet her command. One of the men froze, eyes widening. Another staggered back, scanning readings going haywire. "They sense it," Mason whispered. "They don't understand what it is." Lena took a deep breath. The core pulsed faster, and she could feel it reaching out, sharing memories, visions of June, her father, all the lives touched by Helios. The energy seemed to whisper in her mind, protect, anchor, remember. She extended her hand slightly. Light rippled faintly across the snow. The pursuers stumbled, some dropping their equipment as scanners and instruments failed under the influence of the core's energy. "Back," Lena commanded. Her voice carried across the ridge, firm and unwavering. The energy in her chest surged, sending a pulse through the mountain itself.
Rocks trembled beneath their feet. The men faltered, their movements jerky and uncertain. Mason moved alongside her, keeping an eye on the flanks. "We can't hold them forever," he warned. Lena shook her head. "We don't need to. The mountain helps us." The pursuers hesitated, disoriented. Lena felt the core guiding her, nudging her toward the old collapsed tunnels. They needed to be led into a trap, channeled where the terrain favored them. She ran, Mason beside her, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Behind them, the pursuers followed blindly, still sensing the energy but unable to control it. The tunnels were narrow, treacherous, and winding. Lena led them through the maze-like passages, the core subtly manipulating the environment. Loose rocks shifted. Snow-covered drops appeared. Passages narrowed just enough to slow their advance. The pursuers were trapped. The energy pulsed in Lena, controlling the flow of the chase without harming anyone. She realized the core had learned from her, adapting with her instincts. It wasn't just contained, it was intelligent, responsive, protective. By dawn, the last pursuers were stranded at the edge of the northern cliffs, their scanners failing, equipment useless, forced to retreat. Lena and Mason emerged from the tunnels, exhausted but alive. The Helios core pulsed faintly under her skin, now calm, steady, like a heartbeat after a storm. "You did it," Mason said, awe in his voice. "They won't try again, at least not for a while." Lena nodded, though a chill ran down her spine. The core was safe, but the bond remained. She could feel the memories, the whispers, the mountain itself. This was her burden now. The anchor must endure. The memory must remain. They will try again. The journal's words glimmered faintly. Lena looked at Eagle Ridge, the wind whipping across the peaks. The mountain had tested her, and she had survived. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Helios core was alive, intelligent, patient, and she was its anchor. "Forever changed," she whispered to the mountain. "I will protect you. I will endure." The core pulsed once in reply, a quiet, steady beat. The mountain listened, and Lena Walker had become its keeper. The first light of dawn broke across Eagle Ridge, painting the jagged peaks in gold and rose. Snow clung to the branches of ancient pines, glinting like diamonds. Lena stood at the edge of the summit, the ruined lookout tower behind her, the journal tucked carefully in her pack. The Helios core pulsed within her, steady now, calm, but never dormant. She could feel its presence in every heartbeat, every breath, a constant hum beneath her skin. This was her life now. She was the anchor. She carried within her the memories, the energy, the consciousness of a force that had shaped the mountain, claimed countless lives, and yet could also protect. Mason approached, carrying supplies for their temporary camp. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning the horizon. "The ridge is quiet for now." Lena nodded, taking a deep breath. "For now, but quiet doesn't mean safe. The core, it's patient, and so are others who would try to take it." Mason frowned. "You mean they'll come back?" "Eventually," Lena said softly. "But that's not my problem. My problem is learning to live with all of it inside me." The morning air was crisp, and she felt the core's pulse in response. It was aware, sentient, attuned to her thoughts, her emotions. Lena reached down, touching the journal now glowing faintly. New words appeared. Anchor, keeper, guardian. You are all of these. The mountain has chosen well. She swallowed hard. The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest, but for the first time, it felt like purpose, not burden. Days turned into weeks. Lena and Mason set up a small base near the valley below the summit, careful to remain hidden from prying eyes. They monitored the perimeter, repaired old ranger stations and scavenged supplies, all while Lena maintained the delicate balance of the Helios core within her. The energy pulsed rhythmically, responding to her moods, her focus, her strength. If she panicked, the pulse faltered. If she wavered, the memory surged. But she learned control, slowly, steadily.
learning to channel the core, to let it work in harmony with her mind and body. Sometimes she dreamed vividly. June's face smiling softly, her father's encouragement, even memories of the pursuers trapped in the collapse tunnels. She learned to separate her consciousness from the core's collective memory, letting them coexist without losing herself. It was exhausting, it was terrifying, and it was awe-inspiring. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Eagle Ridge, Lena stood at the edge of the summit, gazing down on the valley below. Mason approached quietly, carrying the journal. "They're all safe in there," he said, nodding toward the journal's glow. "The core is calm, right?" Lena placed her hand on her chest, feeling the steady pulse. "Calm, but awake. Always awake." Mason hesitated. "Do you ever think about what it's doing to you? How much of you it's taking?" She shook her head. "It's not taking, it's sharing. I'm part of it, and it's part of me. I've accepted that. That's the only way to control it, to protect it, to protect everything it holds." He looked at her, admiration and concern mixed in his eyes. "You're incredible, Lena. I don't know anyone else who could do this." She smiled faintly, the wind tugging at her hair. "I didn't choose it. The mountain did. Helios did. But I can choose how I respond. That's the difference." The nights were quieter now, but the mountain had its own rhythm. The Helios core pulsed beneath her skin, guiding her even as she slept, whispering faint echoes of memory, ensuring the safety of the mountain, the valley, and its secrets. Lena learned to walk along the ridges without fear, to climb the cliffs with the pulse of energy synchronizing with her movements. The mountain itself seemed alive, attuned to her presence. Birds circled overhead, deer moved through the forests, and the valley thrived in quiet harmony. But Lena knew the vigilance was eternal. Others would always seek the Helios core, drawn by its power. She had survived the first attacks. She had led the pursuers into traps. She had anchored the core and faced the memory of every life it had touched. The cost had been high. Exhaustion, fear, isolation, and the constant hum of energy within her. But the reward, the peace she could bring, the lives she could protect, was worth it. Months passed. Lena's bond with the Helios core deepened. She could now sense disturbances in the valley, faint tremors, approaching footsteps, even subtle shifts in the weather. The core, once a chaotic force of memory and energy, had become her companion, her guide, her ally. The journal no longer glowed constantly. Its messages appeared only when necessary, like a mentor, reminding her of her purpose. "You are keeper. You are anchor. The mountain remembers. You remember. Together you endure." Lena closed the journal, resting it against her chest. The pulse beneath her skin was steady, synchronized with her heartbeat and the rhythm of the mountain itself. She smiled. For the first time in months, she felt whole. One night, as snow fell softly across Eagle Ridge, Mason and Lena stood outside the lookout tower. The world was silent, serene. Stars reflected in the frost, and the valley below was bathed in silver light. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Mason asked, voice quiet. Lena shook her head. "No, this is where I belong. I've been chosen to carry this, to protect it. I can't turn away." He nodded, understanding. "And the core?" "It's part of me," she said softly. "Always. But I'm in control, and together we keep the mountain safe." The wind carried a faint hum, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat and with the rhythm of the mountain. Lena pressed her hand to her chest. Helios pulsed gently, a living presence contained, anchored, and guided by her. She looked out across the valley, the mountain, the stars. The world was vast, unpredictable, dangerous, and alive. And Lena Walker, the woman who had bought an abandoned lookout tower for $10, had become its guardian.